I don't know if Whitney can hear me, but if she could please change her screen name to first and last name, please.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Dog out. That's the best name. Good morning, Erica. How are you?
Good, Max. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Nice to see you.
You too. Whitney, can you hear me? We have a policy that if you don't use your first and last name, you can't participate in the meeting. So if you don't change your name, I'm going to have to remove you from the meeting.
Hello.
Hey, Art.
Morning, Art.
Morning.
How are you doing today?
Natalie B., I need you to put your full last name on your screen, please. Otherwise, I'm going to have to remove you from the meeting per our policy.
Do if you raise your hand. Good afternoon. Good morning. This is an open meeting of the Traffic Safety Work Group being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. As such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you've find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, Traffic Safety Work Group is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials, all supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce the speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each to by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items of public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that, we will move on to our first agenda item. I will also state that we will call to order the meeting. I believe that was probably done officially before the reading of the script. We do have a quorum, and we'll move on to item number 2, which is public comment for any items which are not on the agenda. And I will echo what Ms. Mooney stated, is that while we will accept public comment, we will not get into a discussion for items that are not on the agenda due to concern with compliance with the open meeting law. And with that, are there any members of the public who wish to make a public comment? Ms. Hobson-Dupont.
Thank you. I live at 11 Washington Avenue and live here year round. I've followed the development of the parking issue with great interest because, you know, it affects all of us here in Matticat, especially like close to the ocean. And parking, everybody's really aware that last year the parking in Millie's restaurant and the popularity of Millie's restaurant has grown so much that, you know, when people come to Nantucket, one of the top things they do is they go to Millie's for the sunset and they get food. And some of them take the shuttle and then some of them take the cars. And as you know, probably better than anybody, we've had traffic jams and backups and just a lot of issues. And how I see it is I'm very interested and encouraged by the planning that your committee is doing to try to rectify this and try to find more suitable parking. And Macy Road, I walk down Macy Road at least once a day, and I think that's a fabulous idea. But I want to encourage everybody to think in terms of the whole picture. What happens in down in the Millie's area and the beach area and Macy Road also directly affects the route of the NERTA bus and also the residents of Washington Avenue. It's one big picture. So what I want to encourage everybody to do is to see how it's integrated and how one change may affect other areas that are very close by in the positive and the negative. So that's what I would like to say. Thanks.
Thank you for your input. It's duly noted. Anyone else? Max Brown? You're muted.
Yep. Thank you. Figure after a year, I'd figure out the unmute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and your time today and for allowing me to speak. If I might, feel like I need to yield to some of my neighbors who might be on time limited work and see if they would like to go prior to me with your approval. I'd like to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. Who else I see on participants? I'm not sure who may be time limited, but I see that Ms. Blake has her hand up. Would you like to go ahead?
State, everybody wants.
Certainly. I am Jennifer Blate, trustee for the family trust that owns the property at 18 Washington Avenue. It's been in the family for 5 generations. So thank you for allowing me to speak and trying to address the problems, whatever they may be. I haven't been able to actually visit I live off island, and because of the pandemic, I haven't been there in a while. So unfortunately, I'm not really aware of what the actual problems are that are going on. But I did get a letter back in January about what seemed like an overgrown tree and shrub issue causing visibility obstructions on Washington Avenue. And it seemed to be a way of saying, you know, you need to please trim back your trees and shrubs, there's a safety issue. And I was not about to ask my disabled uncle to go out and do yard work in January. And so the threat in the letter was, if you don't do it, we're going to do it for you, and you'll get a bill. And that seemed reasonable if it was just going to be trimming some branches back that were blocking the view down the road. But come to find out, there's a much bigger issue going on. You know, whatever the problem may be, widening Washington Avenue doesn't seem like a good solution to any of the possible problems. So there's apparently some parking on Macy proposal that seems like a much better option. But if there are safety issues with traffic speed on Washington Avenue, or pedestrian incursions, or parking volume, it seems like there are much better solutions than the widening of Washington Avenue, which I oppose. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you very much. Also with their hand up, Mr. Pedrati.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, my name is James Pedrati. I live at 12 Washington Avenue. I purchased that house about 10 years ago. I've been coming to Nantucket for about 40 years now. I just want to echo the comments that were made by Janie, that the process, I think, for addressing the issue has to be more holistic than the neighbors on Washington Avenue believe it's been thus far. I've personally been somewhat frustrated with the process by which it's been addressed, and really it's been I believe, a kind of a lack of a cohesive process that's gone through a clear problem definition. It's been very vague at best as to what the whole problem is relating to parking. And it appears to me that there's been a very quick decision to get into this encroachment abatement is a prerequisite to get that done. And then we'll start a study. It seems like it's out of sequence. So I would like to echo a request that comes from our neighborhood, which is, could we pause on the execution of the encroachment issue, which the neighborhood believes would be detrimental to the neighbors. And that would give us time to engage with the neighbors, which thus far we feel has been little or no engagement at all. We receive letters at 15 days to get it fixed. Makes it sound very critical to resolve a problem that's really yet to be clearly defined in any measurable way. So in closing, I would just like to again echo our request as the neighbors to pause, put the 10 neighbors that were requested to address the encroachment issues, to pause on that, and then engage with the neighbors who are keenly interested in addressing the issue of parking and traffic and safety, and we'd be happy to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica?
Thank you. I just want to make one note. You know, public comment is not usually for discussion matters, so I don't want to get into a back and forth with anyone. But the encroachment letters are sent out not through this board. They are done through town administration in consultation, sometimes with DPW. I appreciate that you want to bring the issue here, but an encroachment is an encroachment. We send them out regularly. That is standard language that is used for every single person around Nantucket that is in receipt of one. So I know that there's been some thought that people feel like they've been singled out or that the neighborhood has been singled out. But when the town has been made aware of an encroachment, we take action. We don't have enough staff to routinely drive around the island and pick out encroachments routinely. So again, when we're made aware of one, that's when action is taken. So I just wanted to specify that. And I would also urge that we not have 10 people speak on the exact same matter and echo the exact same concerns.
Thank you, Erica. Ms. Walsh? You're muted.
Sorry, I used a different device today. Thanks for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Erica, for those remarks. I certainly understand that point. I think what you're seeing here is a group of people who have felt that we have not had an opportunity to really have discussion in a public forum. And so we want to make sure that we're being diligent and taking opportunities as they come to us to speak to folks who are involved in the conversation. But we certainly appreciate that not only is some of this not within the purview of this work group, but it's also not on your agenda for today. So I will agree to be quick in that regard. What I will say on the encroachments piece, and understand that this is not a discussion point in the agenda, is that, and I should start by saying I live at 9 Washington, have been coming to the island for about 26 years. My sense, just as a lawyer and understanding how some of this works in other places and having learned how it works on Nantucket a bit, is that this really is an island of encroachments, right? And that this is not, when we feel that we're being singled out, it is because of the arbitrary nature that without any evidence to the contrary, it seems to be something that isn't necessarily going to be part of a master plan or necessary to effectuate a master plan that the town is considering for this neighborhood. So I would just renew the request and reinforce our request that this body do what it can as an advisory group to the select board and to the town administration, who will ultimately make these decisions, to please hold on moving forward with any encroachments. The term encroachment, I think, doesn't fully capture the significance of what some of these homes might included and these households are being asked to do. We're being asked to remove barriers that provide safety for our own families that are there for a reason and have been there for decades. I'm not convinced that this is the first time that I would be surprised, I should say, that this is the first that the town was aware that these encroachments existed. I don't believe that it's a coincidence that this is coming up in the context of what's going on with Millie's, and I love Millie's and I want Millie's to continue to operate, but I think a pause as we look at the holistic issues, including the positive idea that you guys are bringing to the agenda today relative to code, is a way to go. And so, we can't underestimate the significance of what we're asking these families to do, both from a removal of safety barriers perspective, but also from a significant cost perspective. It's not a nominal ask that's being requested of these families, and I would hope and ask that this body do what it can, advocate on behalf of the neighborhood holistically, to ensure that where we ultimately end up is to the best of the entire village and not just one private entity or otherwise. So thank you for hearing us. I appreciate that we probably outnumber the work group members today, so appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. Chandler, would you please mute your microphone? Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Brown, you're up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the time. I will also try to be relatively brief, given that some of the comments that have been made, I don't want to be duplicative. I've lived at 15 Washington Avenue and have owned it since 2015 and been coming to Mattakit for close to 25 years. I've spent the year up there, given that my kids are in college and COVID, and I'm able to work remotely. And I want to thank you and the entire work group for balancing all the competing interests that you face every day. I also want to thank Chief Pittman and Chief Murphy for all they do to keep us safe. We very much appreciate it, and we value the work you do. Finally, I do want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. First, I want to support the proposal that is on the agenda today for Macy Road and Macy Road parking and improvements. We think this will go a very long way to mitigate and solve some of the parking issues caused by Millie's, especially because they've used their parking lot this year, as everyone knows, for dining instead of for parking. And so that has exacerbated the parking situation, which is really an outlier from the sort of normal baseline of parking challenges. I would like to, however, express my serious concern about what has transpired around the issues on Washington Avenue in this work group over the last 3 years without any input really from the residents at all. And I think to Erica's point, which again, Erica, we appreciate your staff work and your support. We haven't had a chance to interact. There's been no engagement. I've worked in local government. I was legal counsel to a mayor of a large city, work in transportation. We get together as groups and we just try to resolve problems, but we haven't had the opportunity to do that, notwithstanding multiple letters trying to do that. We think these decisions should be part of a sort of neighborhood engagement, sitting down with the TSWG, as well as Mr. Beaugrand, because these issues of encroachment and parking are intimately related. And so let me make a couple quick points and then move on. One, if there are immediate safety concerns relative to the NERDA bus, that is removing the boat at 11 Washington or trimming some hedges, we've said on multiple occasions, we're happy to do that. We care about safety more than anybody, our children, our grandchildren, our pets, our neighbors. This is our neighborhood, so we care about safety. But we haven't seen any safety issues at all that would warrant this action being taken to remove encroachments and shrubs and damage sort of the quality of life, and having the town exercise dominion over some portion of the right of way that has for 50 years been untouched. And that to us is sort of one of the challenges we have, is that lack of engagement. It's not just like a vine or a tree. In some cases, this expansion of the road, which the town owns, would come up to people's front porch. So that's like a major issue for us. Secondly, what seemed to have spawned all this are some anecdotal complaints by residents. And I went back and I watched the minutes and watched the hearings and appreciate the concerns about traffic. But there are encroachments all over the island. And I don't think one day anyone just sort of woke up and said, hey, we should exercise control over this area. We've heard from Mr. Beaugrand that in conjunction and consultation with this work group, that it was decided to survey to determine what the town owns. And so that's why we're bringing up this encroachment issue. While it's not necessarily under the purview of the TSWG, it's relevant because it came from the group. And considerations of footpaths, fences, road widening, parking, this seems to have been done in a bit of a vacuum without any sort of comprehensive analysis, traffic safety plan, review of the baseline, how many cars are there? Have there been any accidents? Have people been injured? How many people are walking around the neighborhood? These are the sorts of things that we think need to happen as a prerequisite to taking any action. We care about the neighborhood. We aren't trying to change the neighborhood, ironically. We care about old Mattakit. We care about making sure we retain the majestic nature of the landscape. We agree with the 2006 Mattakit area plan, which says in part that perhaps there should be parking on Ames Avenue. In 7.2 of their report, MAPWG recommends that parking be provided along Ames Avenue in section 8.2 of the Mattocket Area Plan in 2006, which was adopted by the Planning and Economic Board Commission, that the MAPWG recommends the preservation of the existing narrow dirt roads and lanes that meander through the moors and down to the water and protect them from the urbanization efforts such as widening, paving, or other improvements. We don't want this to become Old South Road, nor do we think, again, 25 neighbors have suggested to you, everybody on Washington, on the side streets, that there are no issues of safety or traffic other than some traffic down by Millie's, which I would like to make a couple points about. We think this will be mitigated by the Macy Road improvements. Post-COVID, we even think it will be mitigated more because that parking lot has been used for dining, as I mentioned. Number two, it's been noted in prior minutes that there were some concerns about whether the fire truck could come down Washington Avenue. There's nothing obstructing any fire trucks. We see them go up and down. If the boat is problematic, I think Janie, who's on the call, has said she's happy to move the boat. We haven't been able to have interaction, like conversations. It's been letters and emails. And
Mr. Brown, Mr.
Yes,
Brown, I appreciate all of the comments, but again, for a public comment period, you're really kind of taking this to a whole another level of almost an agenda item discussion. So if you could just, I mean, we hear you all, certainly, but we could wrap up that we have other business. And
no problem, Mr. Chairman. I will wrap up by saying I appreciate you giving us the time to have the conversation. I would entreaty the work group to work with us on a comprehensive solution to the problems. We're problem solvers. We bring, I think, good value to the table, and we want to be part of a solution. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I don't see any other hands raised on the Ms. Brown.
Hi, Betsy Brown. I am at 7 Washington Avenue, Mattocket. I have been there for 45 years, summer resident, and I've raised 3 children and I have grandchildren. And I was surprised to hear that this was a possibility that was going to happen to the neighborhood. It's been a safe neighborhood. My kids have run freely back and forth as little kids to the beach. And I've never really seen a safety issue in all the years I've been there. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I know parking at Millie's did cause a problem because they couldn't use their parking lot. I agree with Max. I'd hate to see Washington Avenue ruined. It's an old Mattocket location. Very few are left in Mattocket. And I'd also would not like to see an Old South Road situation. As I said, I support the neighborhood, and I hope we can come at some discussion and resolution in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Ms. Jemison?
Hi, I own 5C Street, just across the street from Betsy. And I agree with my Mattocket, Washington Street neighbors. I just want to be real quick and say one of my major concerns, I've been taking a lot of walks lately because of COVID, and I walk down Mattocket Road the whole length of it. And, there's a lot of traffic on Mattocket, a lot of people going fast. And in the summer, there's a lot of traffic that happens where they speed down to see the sunset at the last minute. So that street is already a very busy street at certain moments of the day. And so my concern is that, when there's a potential solution behind Millie's, to bring it over onto our street and encourage people to cross the street, people that maybe have been drinking, cars that are driving fast to sunsets, etc., just seems like not the best solution. So I just wanted to make that point. All the other points from my neighbors have been great ones that I couldn't have verbalized better. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Maybe I should have started with, we will put this on as an agenda item for the meeting on April 15th. But I know that you want to be heard as well, and I certainly don't want to prevent or discourage that. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all for your comments. You've certainly been heard. I will also, be sure to put this, as I said, on the next agenda, and hopefully we can continue to work on this, and also be sure that the town manager is aware, who again we are advisory to, of the comments that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us speak, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your time.
We will, if there's no further public comment, we'll move on to our published agenda. And the first item is for a request for a four-way stop at the intersection of Surfside Road, Maya Comet Road, and Surfside Drive. I had made a little graphic. This was a request made by a citizen, but I put together a small graphic that I thought might be helpful for the discussion. And so the request is, as you can see, this is currently a two-way stop control, represented by the white bars entering Surfside Road from the two side roads, Maya Comet Road and Surfside Drive. If most would think probably almost everyone is aware, but just in case you're not, the land bank is in the process of the creation of a dog park at the parcel on the corner or just down Maya Comet Road a little bit. And some of the concern in comments have been that, we may want to be proactive considering the level of traffic that is likely to be generated by such a facility. And with that, I would open up this proposal to discussion from the work group members. Mr. Murphy, any thoughts or concerns?
No, not off of mine. I know this is probably based off of accident history and such, which I think is inflated. We don't have a lot of incidents there, but I really don't have a positive or negative recommendation to this. We've done it at fairgrounds and it's done in front of the schools, so.
Ms. Mooney?
Thank you. I just wanted to note that if the work group does put forward a positive recommendation on this request, it will need to go to the select board and a public hearing will need to be held. So if you say a positive recommendation, it's not an actual done deal.
Thank you for clarification. I would say that I guess I haven't seen any traffic studies or additional supporting data that there is, that this is warranted, and maybe we need to hold this over to actually try to obtain more information if the work group felt that was necessary. Whether there perhaps through police, is there any concern or accident data at this location? I think back to some of the stuff a few years ago where we had intersections that the transportation planner had made us aware for crash type data, and I maybe shouldn't go off of memory, but I don't recall this being an intersection of concern. But perhaps we could look at that, and I'm not sure if Mr. Pittman, if you had any thoughts or data on this offhand.
I don't have any thoughts about it, and I haven't looked up any crash data. So, I mean, I can look in our system for a future meeting to see what we have there, but it just from reviewing the daily logs, I don't recall a lot of incidents at that location, if any.
My sense is that it probably would be prudent to hold, have discussion, see if there's any additional public comment, and then carry this forward to next month and try to obtain that data just for us to look at. And I also could follow up with the director of planning to see if he's able to provide any of the past transportation, that one study, if maybe they could dig that up for us. not do new work, but hopefully from their records provide, you know, that. I don't know if it would be any different than what you're gonna be able to generate, Mr. Pittman. You know, I think that we do have to look at this. One of the things I was wondering about is, you know, is perhaps a first step that we add another crosswalk. It seems on the other side of the intersection. Would that potentially help? You know, if the concern is crossing there, or is there any other, Erica, could we share that aerial again, please? You know, are there any other improvements that we should be considering that would essentially improve the safety? I mean, the concern as I see it with, or point that a stop control here would potentially address would be to facilitate pedestrian crossing from Myacomet to Surfside Drive. And I guess you have a crosswalk there already. Whether another one would really make a difference or not. And if, you know, I think we have to think about the ramifications of adding another stop sign, and that it's going to create another queue of every vehicle traveling both directions in Surfside Road having to stop, perhaps at sometimes without any reason, if there's no vehicles that are exiting, you know, Myacomet Road and Drive. So I'm not personally convinced that, you know, that the stop sign, that the benefits would outweigh the detriment myself, but I'm certainly open to discussion, or if someone feels differently.
Art,
Yes, Mr. Pittman.
I just looked up in the records, and the last two incidents were reported in 2018. One of them was a 2-vehicle accident, and the other involved 1 vehicle. I can't get the information up on it to see if it was wait a minute here. The other one was a motor vehicle and a bicycle. None of them involved any serious injury. So that's the last 2 incidents we've had reported there. I think the issue at that intersection is the queue lines on the the difficulty in getting off of Myacomet or Surfside onto Surfside Road. It's not a pedestrian issue.
Yep. Thank you. That's very helpful, and perhaps we won't,
That's true,
you know, carry it forward. Also, for the minutes, I would note that DPW Director McNeil has joined us. Thank you. Mr. McNeil, since you've joined us, any thoughts or comments with respect? We're currently discussing the citizens' proposal for a request for a 4-way stop at the intersection of Surfside Road, Myacomet Road, and Surfside Drive.
no comments at this time.
Thank you. I'll open it up for public comment on the matter. If anybody wants to raise their hand, either through the chat feature. Mr. Lowell?
Yes, all right, thank you very much for having me. What Mr. Pittman just said is correct. My points that I wanted to just make real quick on this is the misalignment of this intersection is what causes the problem that the chief just mentioned, and I think the fire chief also mentioned earlier. That telephone pole is right smack right where you turn right. That pole got moved, it would make it a lot better as far as that turning right issue. And when a vehicle is coming from the south to turn left on Myacomet, which is not that frequent, but happens a lot around 4, 5, and 5 o'clock, that vehicle has to sort of meander into the center of the intersection and sort of sit there, kind of like what happens at Prospect and in Atlantic. So realigning that intersection down the road, since the town, I believe, Housing Authority owns the land to the right, you know, to the opposite the dog park piece, is what I'm trying to say. And I would suggest the pole for now, and maybe making the crosswalk a little more, kind of like it is at the Boys and Girls Club, like where you have to stop. That's really the only thing right now that's kind of, in my mind, needed there. It's just a teeny little bit more, because you have a bus stop there on that corner of Surfside Drive. And there's a lot of people there trying to cross, quite frequently. And it's one of those crosswalks where, you kind of drive through it without thinking. Okay. So that would be my comment on this tough spot. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Much appreciated. Is there anyone else who would like to make comments? You could raise your hand through the participant list or turn on your video and raise your hand. Not seeing any. What is the pleasure of the work group on this? Is it, do we defer to planning with a recommendation for intersection improvements that don't include a stop sign as a first step? And then, it's certainly on our radar, and people, things may change given the dog park coming online. I also did receive comments from a select board member in favor of the stop signs that I would mention. Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chair, I think the biggest thing here is I think we wait to see, maybe along with referring to a better study and crash data on this intersection, because we have, when we do have an accident here, it's kind of spectacular because of the speed, but the frequency of the accidents aren't as prominent as people would think. If we see an increase with people traveling that bike path or that crosswalk, I think maybe then we look at doing something. But I think right now, I don't think the stop signs are appropriate without more information.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this matter?
907 rescue one.
Ms. Varantella?
Radio check, please.
We can't hear you.
Receive loud and clear, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Christy Farentella, for the record. I did make comments to Art via email, and I would just also request in that recommendation to clean up the corner. There's been a new development that I can't pronounce. It's Hatikva Way on the corner of Surfside Drive and Surfside Road, which has increased kind of vegetation and cars parking on the road that make it very difficult to cross between Surfside Drive and My Comment Road. So I put that forth in the recommendation as well. And I just would also like to comment that I'm very in favor of updating this crosswalk. That's a much used NRTA stop. It's right next to low-income housing developments as well as St. John's Path. And a lot of people without access to cars need access to that bike path. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the matter? So in terms of a most immediate, is it something that is on and included with the DPW line painting, updating? Is that anywhere in the near future that perhaps that could be looked at to be sure that it's, I guess I should say, vibrant?
Line painting will be done before summer. So it's actually, it's advertised now, and that'll be out, it's out to bid now.
That's great. Thank you. And is there unanimous consent or a motion to refer the overall intersection to planning for further study and perhaps realignment?
Make the motion to refer for study.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Murphy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland? Mr. Pittman?
I guess yes. I'm not sure that realignment's an issue, but I guess yes.
Thank you. Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
The chair votes aye. I think we could ask them to look at the poll. I think the comments that Mr. Lowell made, perhaps there are some, and Ms. Farentella, perhaps there's some small recommendations that, could be made, or it could be added to a list for, further adjustment in the future. Mr. Murphy?
Just as through you, Chair, if I could ask that the concerns of the crosswalk, I know that the striping's part of it, but maybe the line of sights and the actual area for the NRTA bus stop be looked at if there's any improvements that could be made. Whether we need recommendations at future meetings or it can be handled by the NRTA or whoever it may be.
Agreed. Thank you. Mr. McNeil, is that something that you think in a short term, the DPW could at least have a quick look at the area for, anything that might be able to be cleaned up a bit?
Yeah, we're doing brush cutting now, so we're happy to take a look for sight lines. With regard to poles or anything of that nature, our substantial crosswalk improvements or changes, we'll take a look. And I'm encouraged that I think the NPEDC is moving forward with a transportation manager position. So I'm encouraged that that's going to happen soon and bring that functionality back to the Plus department.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, hearing nothing else on that matter, we will move on to the next agenda item, which was a request for a yellow no parking line to be removed in front of 47A Westchester Street. And Erica, could you please share that?
Yep, give me 1 second.
Sorry about that. There's a submission made by Mr. White of 47A Westchester Street requesting that a yellow line be removed from along the frontage of his property there. And there's some correspondence in our packet. And Mr. White, are you with us?
I belatedly sent him the link, so I'm not sure if you want to hold this one and go to a next to see if he jumps on.
No, I think we should. He's not here, and we've got a fairly lengthy agenda and a lot of other folks on here. So does anybody wish to take any action or have a discussion, or is there, with consent, we could table it and just send him an email that, if you'd like to present the application, we'll put it on our next agenda. Is that by consent? Okay, so we'll hold this over by consent to the next meeting. Request for a yellow no parking across from 10 York Street. Erica, can you put that one up, please? And this was a citizen request for a yellow line. Is there anybody here to represent this application? Hearing none. Is there any committee or work group members that wish to comment on this or Again, is it something that you feel that I would want to see it be denied without an applicant present? But if anyone wants to discuss it, we certainly can.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Murphy.
I think on this one, I think they have the plan in there, but I think a little bit more work with the turning where the driveway is proposed. I think we can get away with, when the applicant's present, maybe just extending the line. That's the driveway across the street. I don't think a full yellow line across most property is appropriate though, but I don't want to make a decision without hearing their side.
Thank you. So does anybody else have any comments on this, or would there be support to reach out to the applicant and ask that they provided an existing conditions plan, though it doesn't actually show where existing yellow lines are or how turning radiuses would work? Is that the information that we might want to convey to them, as well as ask them to attend the next meeting? Does everybody agree with that? Okay, hearing no dissent, we'll reach out to the applicant and let them know that, and that will be on the agenda for the next meeting. Moving on to the next item, we have a request for a short-term loading zone in front of the Roberts House at 29 Center Street. And I put together this rough graphic to try to demonstrate the proposal, which would be to move the hydrant to the other side of the road. I believe we have had some discussion in the past on this. And then to make a loading zone that would be approximately 42 feet long, and then we would keep a piece of yellow line at the intersection where theoretically a ramp, could be used from, say, like a Cisco truck. It would be a short-term loading zone from 6 a.m. till noon, and then open to timed parking afternoon. And with that, I would open it up to committee discussion. I know one question or point that I am wondering about is if a Cisco truck is parked there, or a pup trailer type of a truck, and you're making the left from India Street, will there be a conflict? I'm not sure there will or there won't, but I certainly think it is tight there. And same with especially a fire truck. Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Now, didn't we talk in this conjunction with removing the parking lot, removing the loading zone on the other side of India Street? Wasn't that in conjunction with this? Because we have one right across the street, and I know it's a pull-in site that we had talked about before. And I'm sure Nat will correct me because he'll probably remember better. But I think part of that was removing one to put in the other. And then the other thing, Mr. Chair, I agree. I think as long as the truck was up far enough and the ramp was down, not into the intersection, but close to the intersection, that I'd love to just make sure with the truck first to check that turn from India onto Center. Not that we'd be making that regularly, but just to make sure.
Thank you. I don't recall that we were going to take out the other loading zone in front of the jewelry store. I think that's a shorter one that I know I see UPS type trucks in that one all the time. And there's, whereas I was thinking this other one might be more on the pull-in type for, and I don't think that one really I've ever seen it really functions typically with the pup trailer type. So I think by adding this, we sort of would get a more diverse opportunity, and the fact that it is only short term, that it's to kind of get the guys that are getting the food in the morning off the boat and through town and back out of there. I think, hopefully, really, I hope it helps to prevent them double parking other places by providing this type of a spot.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I just wanted to try to I couldn't remember if that was part, now we're putting, I know we had talked about that on Broad Street. We haven't gone back to that one with the mid-zone one.
Right.
So now we have a loading zone on either side of India Street and one at the bottom of India Street at Center. So I agree with the idea. I'm concerned that if we don't involve maybe the hotel that's being created there, whether they'll have issues with it and such, we'll have kind of what we get sometimes where we make a recommendation and then within a month or two of the implementation, we have somebody else coming to us telling us how wrong we were.
Not to make them all happy. I mean, I think that my sense is that it may help the hotel operation if it has a restaurant associated with it. And there are other restaurants in that area.
Yep.
Anybody else on the work group, and then I'll go to the public. I'm not seeing any. Mr. Lowell?
Yes, thank you again, everyone, for having me on. So the one-way issue, Chief, was the key piece to make this work. Vehicles fighting and struggling to come down that street and hitting the horse step this year, which to my knowledge never happened before. And if you remember where that light pole is and where that green bench is, that used to be the loading zone. And that wasn't long ago. If Jack was on today, Jack would be nodding right now with his daughter fixing his mute button. Okay. So that wasn't too long ago. And so when we made Broad Street one way down, we fixed so many things, but we also set up small improvements to happen in certain areas. Now, to bring up the Roberts house real quick, during them deliberations, the planning, the loading stuff came up and I was like, oh, it's not about the Roberts house. It's about places, everybody. It's about finding a spot that works for these drivers. So I talked to those drivers and especially the veteran ones, and that spot gets used now for a loading zone. But the yellow line is 38 feet from the corner. I've measured it and actually wrote it on the street with a crayon, okay, not too long ago. They use it, but they're sticking out into the road, but they do it because they have nowhere to go, Steve. So by doing this and making parking in the afternoon, which everybody should be happy about that, it will complement the current tiny sort of, UPS, FedEx, even Sid Wainer can't use that loading zone. And now Sid Wainer is using 32 footers instead of 26s, and they pull out the ramp. And so no matter what they do in that spot, it doesn't work for food deliveries, okay? So that other one needs to stay the way it's been for decades, just because it works for the other people. Now the other thing, the turning left, I don't think there's gonna be a problem because the curbing is so low, you drive over the sidewalk with your tires when you have to. Your trucks have the front setback axle, so you're gonna be able to make that turn easily. And the tree does not poke out into the road. So a pup trailer, 13 feet, can pull right up against the curb there because the tree doesn't hang out into the street, like the one that used to be in front of the Brotherhood. So I don't like talking negatively about trees, but someday that tree will probably, something's going to happen someday. So that would be my point, and I appreciate the time. And you can deliver to 4 restaurants with this delivery. So it will help what I call the Pearl Street part of India Street nightmare, going across the cobblestones with dollies from the old Obadiah delivery spot. That isn't a very good, just so you know, that's going to be on my love list to fix that someday. But this will help proprietors, boarding house, and what's the other one? Black Eyed Susans. I can never think of the name of that. Okay. Thank you so much. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Anything further from work group members? Is there a motion to support or approve to recommend to the select board that the change shown on the graphic be implemented?
I'll make a motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second, if I can just make a friendly amendment that it's not put in place until the hydrant's moved.
Certainly. Is that amenable, Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is on the table that the change be made subject to the fire hydrant being moved. Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Murphy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
Pittman?
Aye.
And Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
And chair votes aye as well. Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Moving on to a discussion regarding Article 82. There's a proposed bylaw amendment for streets and sidewalks at town meeting. And I'm not sure if you're all aware and have seen this before it was in the packet. I suspect many of you have. It's related to signage and establishing minimum sizes. I am aware that we have a couple members of the public who would like to speak on this, including the author of the article. And again, I think that we could have some discussion and hear about it. And ultimately, it would be whether or not the work group wanted to take a position to the town manager with respect to support, concerns, comments related to the article. To briefly go over it, you see on the screen that it would serve to limit the size of regulatory sizes to the smallest minimum as defined under the manual, and then additional regulations with respect to the non-regulatory sides, essentially setting standards, if you will. And with that, is there any, well, I guess perhaps since I do see that the proponent is on, if it was amenable, usually we would go through the work group first, but if you'd like to hear from the proponent, I think that might be helpful prior to discussion, unless anyone feels differently. No, Mr. Kuster, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Kuster, I'm at 83 Main Street. Unfortunately, due to the lengthy public comment, I'm going to have to run real shortly here, but I do have another team member on this, Hillary Rayport, who could jump in and answer some questions. But this is basically, if you will, a bit of a, kind of a housekeeping, approach in that we need to have some, guidelines in place, that limit the sizes of, signs that go in for regulatory issues, and also how close some of these signs are together. Anyway, that's just a real quick summary. And again, I apologize, but I have to be somewhere else. I didn't think it was going to take quite so long this morning. So I'm going to quickly turn this over to Hillary unless somebody else has something real quick for me.
No, thank you, Kevin.
Right. Okay, thanks. And again, I apologize. Sorry.
No problem. Thanks. Ms. Rayport, would you like to pick up the ball there? Or I could, if it would be helpful, I did just receive this morning a document explaining the bylaw that I could share, and then I would put it into the minutes if you would, or unless you wanted to share it.
Sure. Mr. Chair, if you wanted to share that, I can just talk a little bit just to explain the intent and some of the objectives of the bylaw.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah, that's a lovely shot.
Oh, I'm not sure which.
I'm seeing your, I think your desktop, your
You had
wallpaper.
it up, Art, and it's on the lighthouse now.
All right, hold on a second. I just upgraded to Windows 10 like 2 days ago, so I got some small changes that are.
Yeah, while you get that up, I can just talk a little bit about this. So this is a Citizens Warrant article. I'm sorry, really sorry that Kevin had to leave the meeting. He's the sponsor of the article. I did help him with the research and writing the article. So I'm not, I'm not the sponsor, but I can speak a little bit about it. This work came out of a lot of the work that the Historical Commission did, commenting on signs for Milestone Road, just trying to understand what, how signs get proposed. People had a lot of questions like, well, do we have to put these signs up? And is it a law that you have to have a sign? How are these decisions getting made? And what we found was, yeah, Art, now what we see is email.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Wanted to make
There,
sure.
now we see it. We got it now. That's it. Hopefully everybody sees that. So what this bylaw would do would simply be to direct people specifying signs that the sign be the minimum allowable size under the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So there are minimum allowable signs for different categories of signs. In the case of warning signs, which are generally these yellow diamonds, it's 24 inches. And if you want to scroll down a little bit, Art, you can see, okay, so stop. This is an example of a pedestrian crossing sign and, warning sign where it's bigger than 24 inches and it's fluorescent. So this law would say these signs need to be smaller because the minimum allowable is 24 inches. They would need to be yellow orange instead of fluorescent. And there would not be a warning sign, but there would be the sign, sign number 1 would stay. And if you scroll down a little bit more, there's a series of signs. Just keep going. Keep going. I'm looking for the signs along. Yeah, these. Okay. Yeah. So outside Marine Home, there's a series of pedestrian crossing signs. These signs would all be allowable under the bylaw. They're 24 inches, they're not fluorescent, and they're all at a crosswalk. So this bylaw would never prevent anyone from erecting a warning sign at a crosswalk or for an intersection to let drivers know that intersections are ahead. And it would never, of course, prevent any kind of regulatory sign. So the signs that would go away, if you go back up to Milestone Road, this one. So this sign number 1 warns drivers of an intersection, that's allowable. Sign number 2, although it would need to be smaller, it's need to be 24 inches. Sign number 2 would not be there because it's warning you of a sign that's 40 feet ahead of you that you can actually, see when you're driving there. The speed limit sign is a regulatory sign, it would stay. The deer sign it would go away because it's too close to other signs. So there would be an interdiction on signs warning signs within 1,000 feet of another sign, unless it's an intersection sign or a pedestrian sign. And then the sign at the crosswalk would change in color and would change in size. So the bylaw has an exclusion for school zones. So later on your agenda, you have a recommendation or a request for a sign in a school zone that this bylaw would have no effect on that. It also excludes temporary construction signs. And, the idea here really is that I think, you know, the island has a historic character that we'd like to preserve. The signs are intruding on that. I think I think a lot of people would have liked to see fewer signs on Milestone Road. Milestone Road is a state road, so we don't have any ability to take any of these signs down, but I'd like to think if we did have this bylaw, the state would have taken a different approach to what signs were recommended. So hopefully that makes things clear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's anything I should have explained that I didn't, please ask.
Thank you, Ms. Rayport. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this agenda item?
Mr. Chairman, while I'm here, Max Brown, I certainly think it's a great idea to sort of retain the historic character, and so long as we balance the safety needs, which it looks like this does after reviewing the warrant article. So thank you for the presentation, and certainly look forward to supporting it.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Work group members, discussion on the presentation or the proposal, thoughts, concerns? None. Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, Art, I think this is a positive thing. I think this you know, I don't think it's going to hurt in terms of the safety. I think we'll still get the signs that we need, and it'll be a positive contribution to more of the aesthetic on the island, which is, you know, let's keep the character of the island as it is. I don't think this is going to hurt too much, so I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, work group members? I tend to agree with Mr. Rowland. I think that if this was written a little differently, I think I would have may have had more concerns, but I think that a lot of it is almost guidelines that they've laid out so that it's not just prohibitive. Personally, I kind of wonder if anyone, like, the deer signs really make a difference, you know, for example. I mean, do people drive differently because there's a sign with a deer on it? I tend to think not, but I don't know. So I guess the question is, is there support to recommend to the town manager, or simply inform the town manager that the work group is in favor of the warrant article or any other action? A motion or action?
I would put a motion to support the article.
The motion's been made. Is there a second? Not seeing a second, so I take it that the motion's going to die for lack of a second. So is there?
Can I second for discussion, Art, just to go so we can move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. That's certainly appreciated. So the motion is on the table to support the warrant article as drafted. And Mr. Murphy, for discussion.
I think, and I'd love to hear honestly from Ray. I hate to put him on the spot in the middle of a meeting, but you know, he's the one who put up these signs, and what his opinion, whether this will make a difference with the smaller signs, and whether he feels these other signs, like the perfect example is the one before the crosswalk on Orange Street, whether that's the colors make a difference, or, you know, just his personal opinion.
Yeah, Murph. So I actually usually only do the 24-inch anyway. I usually order the minimums. These were done by contractors, you know, obviously off island. Milestone, definitely, I did not install those. Those are all larger signs. The greenish pedestrian crossing signs, I only use those. The ones that I install, I only install in the school zone. I try to do the yellow ones anywhere else. If, you know, like the ones down just past Marine, I think those were done by a contractor also. I didn't install those. We can change those if that's, if this goes through, those can always be changed to the yellow and smaller ones. It's all I stock is the 24-inch. The only bigger signs I stock is the school zone signs, which are larger, and then the stops and do not enter. Those are 30-inch, but those are standard anyway. But mostly I do all 24-inch. I try not to do the big ones. Those were all installed by off-island contractors because that's what they install off-island. That's what they go by MUTCD, and they're used to putting those up.
Thank you, Mr. Sylvia. Any other comments or discussion?
If I may, Chair.
Yes.
I hearing that makes me much more comfortable saying that the idea behind the article is what we're trying to do anyways within the public works. So I would be in support.
Yeah, can I just make a quick comment, Art, if that's okay?
Yes,
I don't have my role. So just to kind of, and the intent of this is good. It's just that we, going back to the roundabout at the post office, 2007. Remember the signs that got put up by the state? They were these metal, like sharp edged razor blade things with bolts sticking through. And back then, we just sort of waited for it to get signed off and kind of went and unbolted them and put up Nantucket signs. No one said a word. Everything was fine. And unfortunately today we get with Facebook and social, just all of this sort of stuff that goes on today makes, fodder for people to think that we never fixed anything like this. It's just that today we have more of that with the different colors and things like that. So there are times where, regular signs, I guess I'll use that term for Ray, the stuff that we know is okay is sort of finds its way back to these spots. So I think the intent of this is good. And I think that we should be using a sort of a soft approach to fix these things, not trying to, use a sledgehammer. And a good example of this is the signage at the crosswalk behind Island Lumber. There's so much signage. There was a couple of pretty good substantial accidents there last year because people think they have to slam on their brakes there because the signage is almost actually making it more dangerous. And this is something I've spoken to a few of you guys about, just talking. And I think that, that there's good points here, but we have to keep in perspective of safety, real safety, versus just what something looks like. So we had deer signs when I was a kid. I think they're kind of crazy, especially now we got more deer than people here. So I don't know. Anyway, thank you. That'd be my point tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Mr. Pedrati?
Hi, I'm James Pedrati, 12 Washington Avenue. I just wanted to share one comment, not in favor or objecting to the proposal, but I worked for quite a few years for a manufacturing company that actually did make highway sign materials. And I was active on some subcommittees that drafted language on the MUTCD. And the point I wanted to make was there's a competing issue on particularly the fluorescent lime yellow color. On one hand, it's obnoxious and bright and people, it's conspicuous and so it just doesn't fit the Nantucket culture. But it's obnoxious by design. It's designed to be attention getting. And so there'll be a trade-off there. And I think people just need to also be aware of another point, and that's color recognition. A lot of work, I'm sure as many of you are aware, there's a lot to be said for color recognition. If you have an octagonal red, it doesn't even have any letters on it, people understand red means stop. They have the warning signs, the information signs, and the fluorescent lime yellow color does have two benefits. One, it is by design much more conspicuous at dawn and dusk than non-fluorescent colors. And more importantly, it has message recognition. So when people see it, they understand that there's pedestrians involved. That color is really reserved for that application. So I just thought I would share that with the group. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anything further before we take a vote on the motion on the table? Hearing none, we'll move along. So the motion had on the table, just to reiterate, is to support the warrant article. Mr. Murphy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
Mr. Pittman?
I'm going to vote no, just because of I agree with what Mr. Petrati said. I'm concerned about the fluorescent color recognition issue. Does assist with low visibility and people that have that problem with recognition. So I vote no.
I'm going to vote no. I believe that the town takes care of historical character when safety is addressed first. And my understanding is that this is regulating something that is currently handled.
Okay. I'm going to vote in favor. I think that for the reasons previously discussed, that it was it still allows the safety to be addressed as well as provide some flexibility. So we'll just do a memo to the town manager and it can go from there. Thank you, Mr. Pittman.
I would request that the memo reflect the vote.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir. Thank you, Ms. Rayport.
Thank you very much. It was a robust discussion and I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Moving on to the next agenda item. Sorry. We have a discussion of potential road improvements and parking along Macy Road in Matticat. And I see we also still do have in attendance quite a few members of the public. I guess it might be helpful if, Erica, can you share that? So this came out of a discussion at the select board meeting. And so I put together this graphic and to facilitate this discussion and for the committee to consider, the creation of additional parking in the area along this this parcel and the layout of Macy Road. I have one question that I do hope will ultimately be answered. My understanding is that I wasn't sure whether this parcel is actually deed restricted or not, but I've been informed that it may not be, and that parking actually could be used on that and not just the layout. So I think part of the discussion would be the layout is 40 feet wide, whether or not, all of the parking stays in the layout or whether that parcel could be used. There's also some concern. You can see down in the southeast corner, the condition of Chicago Street and Macy Road right at the corner there is extremely soft sand. So I think there would have to be some improvements made there, some hardener or some base mix put in. And I think the discussion for the work group would be whether to support a proposal similar to this to the select board, and then also have some discussion of what that ultimately would look like and how it could be implemented. So the proposal would be to brush cut. I think, or as I see the proposal, it would be to sort of maintain still a rural character. It wouldn't be an asphalt kind of a thing. But I do think that the question, will, you know, when you start having a lot of turning movements in that kind of sand there, that, you know, we could see a continuation of, you know, the material, the surface material becoming quite loose, and there may have to be some additional improvements to maintain the stability, you know, going along there. But I think there could be opportunity for a creation of a good amount of parking. And I would also mention that you know, this is a 2019 air base aerial map from the GIS, and there has been, you know, further erosion along the parking area that's to the south of Chicago Street. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion for comments or concerns by the work group, and then we'll go to the public. Maybe I'll just run through the work group. Mr. Rowland, any thoughts or concerns?
I think it sounds like a good idea. It looks like from the town map that there's a strip of town of Nantucket owned property right along Macy Road. I assume that's mostly what we're talking about.
Yeah, that was the parcel I was referring to, as to, you know, we would need confirmation that in fact could be used for this purpose. And then perhaps it might provide some additional flexibility in not having to try to get everything to fit within the road layout, which would probably mean having to also shift the road on the southeast side if you were going to try to, you know, make that all fit in the layout. So I think we would have to make sure that in fact the parcel could be used. But if that was the case, I think it would just make it that much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the, you know, haven't driven up and down Macy Road a lot myself. So on the surface, it looks like a good idea to solve some parking issues. So sure.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As we've discussed, I'm supportive of this endeavor.
Mr. Pittman?
I'm in support.
Mr. Murphy?
In support.
Ms. Mooney?
I just pulled up the deed to that property, and I just wanted to note that it says it is subject to the restriction that the lot may be used for beach and recreational purposes for use and access to Matticat Beach, which may also include access and public parking and roadway purposes for the beach.
Very helpful. Thank you. So it sounds like we have, and I'm also in support. It sounds like we have, you know, full support of the work group. While there are members of the public, you know, we'll certainly accept public comment on it, but the meeting has, especially with the way it started, if you're in favor, we may not have to go, you know, on for too much. So if there's anybody who would like to speak on the matter, please raise your hand. Mr. Brown.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. No filibustering here. I think it's a fantastic proposal. I think it addresses many of the concerns in the neighborhood around parking and Millie's in particular. If I might just ask one question so I get a good understanding of it. How many cars do you think that will actually be able to park? Is it like 30?
Oh, it's much more than that, but I haven't done an analysis of the length and the angle parking. I think if this is supported, then it's going to go to, you know, the select board. And my sense is that it's going to be as many as possible. And I would think I'll defer also, you know, whether or not this is something at a further level that is simply implemented by the DPW, or whether there needs to be some plan work and, you know, some staking and that sort of thing. And then at that point, they may be able to determine, you know, a layout, but I don't know. I didn't try to do a calculation of the length. And
so order of magnitude, you like just, you know, between 30 and 50 cars. If it's angled and it's X number of feet. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the scope is. But
I'd have to get back to you on that.
No problem.
I don't want to hazard a guess and have it in the minutes of the meeting that we thought we were going to create, you know, X parking spaces. My sense, if the board agrees that we're recommending the proposal to the select board, if they support it, then they could direct the other departments to, you know, develop the plans and, you know, perhaps determine the exact extents and those sort of things, and that this is more of a concept level from the work group supporting it.
Got it. Thank you. I think it's a fantastic proposal. I think will go a long way to
Thank you.
alleviating and mitigating, especially in a post-COVID world where Millie's will actually have their parking lot back. And I weigh in because I think it is related to some of the other issues. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion to support the proposal as drafted on the graphic.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Yes. So the motion's been made and seconded, and the floor is yours, Mr. McNeil.
I'm curious, particularly because I don't know the dimensions of the parcel, but whether keeping Macy Road bi-directional and maybe instead of angled head in, again, we don't really know until it gets studied whether that's possible or not. And I guess I would just not want to limit our ability to look at this without knowing the more details.
I think that's a very good point. I may have, in drafting the graphic, got ahead of myself with that, of thinking of the angle, but perhaps, and I was also honestly thinking that we were going to be limited to the layout, and with the additional parcel. And one of the reasons that I actually would perhaps suggest an amendment along the lines of what you mentioned, Mr. McNeil, is that if it were head-in parking with two-directional traffic, then this area as created will continue to function after the intersection is lost to erosion at Macy's. And if we make it one way, while it may flow well right now, just because of that sort of the general traffic pattern now, my sense is that I would certainly support what you mentioned. In other words, and I could redo a graphic if this was amenable to everybody, or would be simply that we don't address traffic direction, and we simply recommend the creation of parking, head-in parking, and then you determine, a further process, whether that's angled or straight in, but certainly not just parallel, right? So that we're creating as much parking as we can. So the recommendation would be to create head-in parking along Macy Road and stay silent on the aspect of the road direction. Further discussion. I mean, there is a motion on the table for the graphic, and I may have,
I can amend my motion to reflect what you were just stating about not restricting it to the graphic.
I would second that.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded, and I would prepare a new graphic that could be used so that it would be clear to the select board that the recommendation is simply to create head-in parking along Macy Road. So motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
Mr. Pittman?
Aye.
Mr. McNeil?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. And then if we could, if it was amenable to the work group members, I do see that Mr. White has joined the meeting. If we could go back to his proposal at that was item number 2, then we could perhaps address the matter and not have it to carry it forward. Any objection? Hearing none, we'll go back to item number 2. Mr. White is with us. This was the proposal for a yellow line, the removal of a yellow line. And there seems to be some discussion as to whether there was one there before or not. Mr. White, thank you for joining us. Would you like to present your proposal?
Yeah, thanks for that. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Somehow I managed to get through a year of coronavirus, running a law office and never having a Zoom meeting. So bear with me here if I struggle a little bit. So I guess I just kind of tell the story back when I bought the property, keep it very brief. Bought the property in 2010. There was not a structure on the front of the property out by Westchester Street, just a little triangle of grass. The house is way back off Westchester Street. For somewhere around 8 years, all different neighbors would park their vehicles on the front of that property where the yellow line is now on the grass, frustrating me because they would kill the grass. They would leave vehicles that were there off season for extended period of time, as big as Suburbans. So fast forward a bunch of years, I go to build the cottage. My neighbors up at who also share the bottom of the driveway, I asked that I not include any hardscape or parking along the driveway or in back of the cottage. So I was amenable to that because I felt I would have a parking space out in front of the cottage, because for 8 years, approximately 8 years, people always parked there. There was no yellow line there. Somewhere after construction, I don't believe it was before construction started. If it did happen, I didn't notice it. I was just out there one day, probably going back close to a year now, that I contacted your department, kind of towards the beginning of coronavirus, took a picture of it, and there was a yellow line there. I might have been there for a while. I don't know. It's not something I was paying close attention to. But when I realized it, I realized that now I've really hurt myself because there's nowhere to park for the occupants of the cottage. We permitted the cottage without considering any driveway in the front because I didn't think it was needed. I figured it'd just be best to parallel park there, knowing that I could get pretty far off the street, because we set the bushes that we built, the privet that we put in, pretty far back. And I figured a small car would barely even be over the yellow line into the street, yellow line that was not there at the time. So I brought it to your department's attention. I happened to run into a gentleman from your department who was very friendly out there a couple days ago when I was there. He took the position that there was some specks of paint there from many, many years ago. I'm not going to argue that, because it seemed like a great guy. I don't think that he would make that up. But, you know, from my visibility for close to 8 years, there was really nothing there showing yellow line, and people parked there regularly. So I relied on that I could have parking there when I planned the cottage. So here we are. So I met him out there. There's plenty of room to park there. You can get pretty far off the street. I don't need it to cover the whole front of the property. I just need it to cover enough be removed enough for one space. So what I would ask is, or propose, is that we paint over or remove a large enough section of that yellow line that there's at least a place to park. As you go up and down Westchester Street, it's kind of sporadic where you have yellow and where you don't. He had indicated to me that they usually have yellow in front of every driveway, which still is not the case. But I guess I would ask that we allow a parking space in front of the cottage, enough to park one car.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Work group members, any discussion on the proposal? I guess I see it partially as a question of procedurally, are we, recommending the removal of a yellow line and creation of an on-street space based on past history of there being a yellow line there? And are we
or not being a yellow line there?
Or is there support for that? I'm just looking at the aerial. It doesn't appear there. I see there's a driveway on the other side of the property opposite of this, but that does appear to be further to the east. We want to be sure, of course, that we don't do something and then they come back and say, well, that yellow line was there so that we could get out of our driveway.
Well,
it does.
Can you hear me? Am I allowed to talk now? I don't know.
I'll get back to you, Mr.
Okay,
Mr.
thank
White.
you.
Let's have the discussion. And then, it does appear, as I look at the overall stretch of road, it's a fairly straight section of the road. So I don't know if there's an issue there. I guess the other thing that comes to my mind is whether or not we actually need some kind of plan work to determine, is this space within a travel lane or is it in fact off of the road? That's the piece of information that I'm not clear about. So any other work group members, and then Mr. White, we will come back to you.
Thank you.
Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So notwithstanding the discussion that was had earlier with regard to maintenance of the line work, I think the challenge that I am wrestling with simply is around the neighborhood in general. In this particular area, there's really not a lot or any on-street parking. All of the, at least from aerials, all of the structures that are existing along the corridor have some level of on-street, off-street parking associated with them. And while I understand there may be some shared driveway discussions between the neighbors or permissions, and there may be some legalities involved there. I think that the challenge is, if we try to solve this, from my perspective, if we try to solve this by simply removing a yellow line, which would happen to be out in front of this structure, it's not a dedicated space. So someone else could still park there and would not solve the problem ultimately. So I guess from that perspective, to me, it sounds like it's something that ought to be solved between the neighbors.
Okay, and I just shared the screen from a Google Earth perspective that may help help with this discussion. And I suggest that, I suspect that this picture is dated and there may be some additional landscaping and that sort of stuff in there as well. Mr. Murphy?
The main concern I have here and looking at this is, if we allowed on-street parking, we're cutting down a travel lane. There's no parking on either side of the road. And like Mr. McNeil said, historically, this street hasn't been from this way up on-street parking. And the parking that's done was off the roadway, whether it was inside of a yellow line or not, it was off the roadway. So I think that kind of my thought, that, the sign says no parking either way or either side, back on the other side of New Lane heading this way. Now, granted, there's no other signs going forward, but I don't know. I think allowing a parking that would be on street at this location would be detrimental to the flow of traffic and allowing cars going to the other travel lane.
Thank you. Any other work group members? Mr. White?
Yeah, respectfully, I don't think many of those facts are actually correct. It's not really an issue between the neighbor that shares the driveway with me, because we have a reciprocal easement that goes over my property leading up to the houses way back off Westchester. That reciprocal easement in that driveway is not in any way impacted by what we do with this.
Mr. White, if I could just stop you, I may have confused you. I was referring to the driveway on the other side of the road.
Yeah. Okay. Great. As far as that goes,
yeah,
that's just a driveway that over time has just been widened by many people living in that house that don't own the house, and they jam 3-4 cars into that little driveway. To me, it would be a bigger concern than this parking space. I don't believe I would have any objection over there at all, since they always parked in this space before the yellow line was painted anyways, those people. As far as the house across the street that you noted, the board or the commission noted that the driveway is a little further back and probably wouldn't be impacted by backing out. That house was never there. That house is relatively new. So when they built that house, the yellow line was in no way visible to even be there. So they wouldn't have relied on building that driveway in that house thinking that there was no parking there, because there was always a car there, just not ours. So all of those neighbors benefited. Their contractors, while they were building a house, were constantly parked there on my grass. In fact, I had asked the contractor about it, and he threatened me with physical violence, but that's a whole nother story. So, based on past use, I think that, while I respect the points that were raised, none of them are actually accurate. As you come up Westchester Street on the way to Liberty, North Liberty, there's parking all along there on the right side, and it's much more narrow and restrictive, and not even close to what this would be. So the character of the neighborhood and the street of Westchester is such that there's too much parking coming up the narrow part of Westchester Street before you get to North Liberty. May I ask, is this the department that would decide on curb cuts, or is that a different process?
That's a, the DPW issues curb cuts. However, if a curb cut results in the loss of on-street parking, then it comes to this work group for a recommendation, and then that is ultimately decided by the select board.
Well, it certainly wouldn't, if I applied for a curb cut, which I didn't do initially because I thought I could parallel park there. I'm just wondering if I'll get some, maybe added cooperation given the facts, because I can park a small car perpendicular into the property right next to that other driveway. And I'm not impacting street parking because the street parking is the very parking that we're discussing now. I mean, of course, I've already engineered, spent excessive amounts of money on engineering and planning and permitting, landscaping, irrigation, plantings. But, I would undo that if I could put a parking space in there in lieu of the parallel. I don't believe my neighbors that share the driveway would object to that. They just didn't want parking along the driveway and in back. And I understand that because it wouldn't look nice as you enter into the properties.
There's another piece of if it's on the same property, you would need a special permit to have a second curb cut. So you'd also be looking at going to the planning board. But
yeah, that's true.
If you wish to discuss that with your own consultants. But that could be I don't know how this shared driveway straddling the line and that sort of thing may impact that. That's a bigger discussion than this. I think just for today, to stay on topic, is there any further discussion or support for removal of the yellow line as requested?
Well, I guess I would just clarify on another point that was brought up. If a car were to be parked there where the yellow line is now, you probably have a good 8 feet, 6 to 8 feet, I would say. And I can make it larger because I can move the bushes, but the car could be parked on the right side of the yellow line where it's actually not even in traffic. So if the yellow line's not there, whoever parks there, whether it's me or somebody else, and I recognize that I can't call that my driveway, but I have confidence enough that the demand isn't going to be there for that parking spot except for by one neighbor, and I know that they wouldn't utilize it. And that's my risk. I think that the traffic would not be obstructed at all, and certainly nothing like further down Westchester Street where you can only have one lane of traffic and are hitting mirrors and trees with your mirrors as you come through there. In comparison, it's not even an obstacle.
I think you would, what you describe, and I'm not telling you this definitively, you may want to get your own, consultants, but you may create a zoning violation there back to the curb cut issue if you're, in over the property line and having a second parking area there. You might find that becomes problematic or not. I don't know, but I just would put that.
Fair enough. I was just addressing the concern about blocking traffic, and that, when you do parallel park along the road, nobody really leaves it all the way out in the road. In fact, most of the parking that close to town is done up on the sidewalks.
Understood. Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, I think in order to look at this a little more carefully, I think it would be helpful to see a plan showing the conditions on the ground, the building, the lot lines, the street layout.
I have all that. I have a final as-built that has just been done, so I can submit that. I have no problem carrying over. The construction won't be done for another 30 days anyways.
So in that basis, if it's okay to everybody, and back to Mr. White, and given that you clearly have local folks working on this for you, maybe you look into some of those other alternatives and issues and decide, and then next time could either make another proposal for something different or and provide the plans, and maybe we could have an understanding of, where, the edge of asphalt is in relation to your property line.
May I ask what your on-site visit revealed? I mean, that gentleman seemed to be somewhat reasonable in that there was plenty of room for me to put this space on the far side of the utility pole without interference to any other parking space.
Mr. Pittman?
Yeah, I just, I think it's important for Mr. White to know that it would, regardless of what his plan is going to show, it would be very difficult hurdle for me to get over allowing that type of parking to exist on that road, because it's the first one before the next one happens. And I think what he needs to focus on is coming up with a plan for a parking space on the site at the cottage, regardless of what regulatory hurdles he'll have to go through. That's his issue. I think I would have a hard time. He'd have to really show something really fantastic for me to be convinced that what I see in front of me now is a good idea.
Thank you for that, because we certainly don't want to waste your time either, Mr. White, and have you come back if there's something that simply just doesn't have support. I would say that I'm willing to carry it over and look at what you present, but I have a similar position myself. I'm wondering why you couldn't put a parking space in here that is off of your existing driveway.
Yeah, it's my crazy California neighbors is the answer. But, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree if it were not for the fact that this was multiple large vehicles were parking there for 8 years. And I relied on that in my construction and permitting of the cottage. So nobody was concerned about what cars were parked there for 8 years. Why now?
That's not something I can answer. I can only address the.
If I was aware of it, it would have been probably ticketing them. I'm not so sure we didn't.
I actually called the police one time and they didn't do anything.
Is it posted?
Okay, well, it is what it is. I mean, I have my feelings. I'll reserve those to myself and see if I can get something permitted or get in another fight with the Californians, which I'd like to avoid, but okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so it seems that there's no action unless someone wants to make a motion to support or deny.
I'll make a motion that we deny the request.
The motion's been made. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Murphy. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Rowland, how do you vote?
I'll say aye.
Mr. McNeil?
Agree, yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Pittman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. White.
In layman's terms, does that mean everybody denied it?
Well, there wasn't support.
I don't know what I mean. Forgive me, but I don't know what I means.
There was not support to remove the yellow line.
By any members.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you coming back to me.
Sure thing.
Thank you. All right.
Going back to the agenda, we have a request for slow signage on the Surfside Road crosswalk at the elementary and intermediate school that was submitted by, I believe, Director of Facilities, I think is Diane's title, but not positive. Erica, could you share? Oh, I have the packet. I can do it.
And do you want me to share that video? I couldn't upload that into the packet, but I did email it to the group, but I can.
I don't know that we need that. Does
Okay.
everybody need to see a video? Let me share this.
You got it? Because I can do it.
I got it. Yeah. Okay. So the request is the installation of a slow crosswalk ahead sign And that was the extent of what she's asking for, correct?
Yes, I believe so. If you go up one more,
Yeah.
and obviously the verbiage will be up to the town, but some sort of, slow crosswalk sign so people know that there's one ahead is what they're asking.
Discussion, and this came from the schools. So, Mr. Pittman?
This is irony.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Discussion about a half hour ago was about not having signs like this installed. So I honestly, signs, the last thing we need is one more sign for somebody to have to be looking at instead of looking at the intersection, the crosswalk is clearly marked there. What is not done properly there is the way well, it's a difficult crosswalk to begin with because it's almost like one that's in the middle of a block. It's not at a clear intersection, although there is a road there. Bartlett Road is the clear intersection. Larrabee is not. And the reason for that is because cars are queued back from that stop sign on Bartlett way past Larrabee Lane a lot of times. And what happens is that crossing guard just darts out from between the stopped vehicles into the path of the other lane. And they've got a little handheld stop sign that is not very visible. And I would feel better. Number one is if that crosswalk wasn't even there and the crosswalk was actually at Bartlett Road for the school traffic. But I lost that argument a few years ago. Secondly, I think that what would be a better solution would be for the crossing guards to be more visible, to have a vest, a highly reflective vest, and to carry a sign on a pole that can be visible, they can stick out, or people can see something moving there. I saw the video, and the truck, I could see myself doing that same thing that truck did. I probably have numerous times in that scenario. And I just think that, that whole situation there is one that's problematic, mainly because of the fact that those cars are queued back so far from Bartlett Road. And I think we need the stop sign at Bartlett Road. I don't think we need the crosswalk at Larrabee. It's not that much further, and most of those people are going that way anyway.
Thank you. It's helpful. Any other work group members wish to comment on this? Mr. Murphy?
I just thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Pittman's right. I think this is, if it's a recurrent incident or the crossing guard coming out from behind a vehicle and another vehicle going too fast, after frustration, I guess, of leaving a stop sign. Design-wise, I think there is issues there, but I don't know what more we could do other than putting up another sign that will be ignored and the person will still go by just as fast. So,
Mr. Rowland or Mr. McNeil, anything you wish to add to the discussion?
I'm not so sure that the sign is going to be that helpful. I wonder if there's other measures temporary measures they could take during these times that it's the crossing guard is there, like a temporary bollard or something that might be in the roadway. So I'm not.
They have that already.
They already have it.
Okay, so I'm not sure what else to offer them.
Short of flashing lights, I don't think there's anything more you could do there.
Yeah.
That would be effective. Flashing lights would be effective, but those are prohibited. So I think the other option is to make the crossing guard flashy by bright gear and maybe a fluorescent red pole with a stop sign at the top of it, that type of thing.
Agreed. Is there a motion to support, deny, or take no action?
I would make a motion that we deny the request for a sign, but that we recommend at the school, or that two things. One, that planning department review the safety or the necessity for that crosswalk to be at that location rather than down at Bartlett Road. And then also that we recommend to the school that they provide the proper equipment to the crossing guards that would make them more visible.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Pittman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. McNeil?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. We'll go back to the agenda. Any other business for matters that were not on the agenda, not anticipated within 48 hours of the meeting? Mr. Pittman?
Yeah, this goes back to the public comment part, and a concern I have, let me look for it here. So the Board of Selectmen a week or two ago adopted a new rules governing public comment at their meetings, and they did that after following a case up in Natick against the school committee where an individual was cut off from making comment, which the courts decided that that was improper. I mean, essentially the court decision said somebody can get up at public comment and can read the phone book if you want to. You can't stop somebody from talking. You shouldn't stop somebody from talking. That you need to allow somebody to talk about whatever they want to talk about during a public comment period. What you can do is, if it's related to an agenda item, you can direct them to the agenda item, which we properly do, or you can establish maximum time limits for somebody to talk. And the Board of Selectmen's policy adopted a 3-minute time limit from which people can talk. I would like this committee to adopt the Board of Selectmen's public meeting guidelines so that we're consistent across town government as to how these are handled at public comments handled at public meetings.
I appreciate that. I think that that would be appropriate for an agenda, as an agenda item for the next meeting, for that to be formally adopted by the work group. Does that sound right, Erica? Thanks. Okay, so we'll include that next. I think that's very helpful. And I followed those discussions and was aware of that and was trying to also, respect that as well today. And I, do know that it did take up some time, but I want to also.
And it was apparent you were trying. But it's, we just need to put it in that policy needs to be attached to the agenda so that people know what it is before they actually get up to talk.
Is there any other business? I only had one comment, which is that I am hopeful that Old South Road is in the Richmond project is going to be addressed in the near future. I don't want to get into a discussion about it or what and have it as a formal agenda item in the future, but it may need to be if they're not going to get it done. Mr. McNeil.
Sure. Mr. Chair, just following up on the meeting minutes from January 21st under other business. I'm curious if you had checked back with Ms. Mooney regarding the 4 motorcycle moped parking spots that were previously approved. Hoping to move those forward for summer, recognizing that some or one or maybe even all of them could be affected by potential outdoor dining. But I think being proactive now and getting moped parking or motorcycle parking set up for summer, which would ultimately be there year round, would be super helpful.
I did, and I believe it's to the town manager at this point.
Thank you.
Any other, hearing no other business, is there a motion to, or discussion concerns related to the minutes from January 21st, 2021?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Rowland, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Pittman?
Aye.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes,
The chair votes aye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
Mr. Pittman?
Aye.
Mr. McNeil?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
I,
Thank you all. The chair votes aye. Thank you.
Art.
Thank
See
you.
you soon. Bye.